Hello everyone, and do you want to know if a servant is good enough to spend your hard-earned quartz on? Then you are in the right place. Welcome to the FGO Gacha Guide. Today our topic servant is the man who needs no second strike, Shuwen. Old man assassin version. We'll be covering all the points you can see on screen. Before we go into these, let's have a fun fact with Old Man Lee. He is a master of Baji Quan, a martial arts style focused on short-range explosive power. He was a person in real life rather than a fictional character, and so well practiced, he killed many in martial arts matches to the point where he was eventually poisoned to death by a victim's relatives because he had so many enemies from all the people he had killed. Fun. Now, let's get into the gameplay stuff. So first off, my personal opinion on Old Man Lee. In my personal opinion, Shuwen is not a very good person to roll for. Much to his history, Lee's strength comes from a single explosive turn, but in FGO, break bars exist. FGO, break bars exist. While Lee is a very strong single turn, his follow-ups are lackluster. Break bars force you to need good follow-up turns. He works decently well for challenge quests. He's okay, but anything that requires break bars, which most challenge quests do, greatly slow down his effectiveness. On top of that, his low hit counts can't even have him be some sort of star generator like most other assassins can. And while he is arts focused, even with Castoria, he's pretty underwhelming because of his lack of self buffs for more than a single turn. Now on to the stats. Shuwen is a 5-star assassin class servant, meaning he is strong to riders and weak to casters. He has 11,470 attack at level 90, which is pretty middling for a 5-star servant's attack stat. However, as an assassin, his attacks all have a 0.9% attack modifier to them, so you can modify his attack down lower than it appears. His HP at 90 is 12,568, one of the lowest 5-star healths in the game, on top of the relatively middling attack. As for his hidden stats, we can see that his NP gain per hit is 0.99%. This is very good, extremely good. As for his cards, in order to use those, his quick attack has 4 hits, his arts cards have 2 hits, and his buster card has 1 hit, while his extra has 5. This is overall pretty low hit counts for a modern servant. His MP gain on hit helps make up for this greatly, and a single arts card from him is going to do better than 3 arts cards from a servant like poor Abigail here, because hers is only a 0.25 MP charge on hit. So, at the end of the day, he is able to charge his own MP quite well for himself. Now, his star weight, aka how easy it is to get critical stars onto his cards rather than other servants, is 97. Relatively average, to be honest. His star creation rate, aka how easy it is for him to create stars with his cards, is 25.3%. Very high, pretty much what you'd expect for an assassin. However, he only has 1 quick card to really make up for it. Arts cards do not produce stars at a base, and buster cards don't make very many stars at all. So he can't make a lot of use of this. Overall, with everything put together, his stats come out pretty below average, especially considering he is an assassin, and that 0.9% attack modifier doesn't help. Now, let's look on his deck in Noble Phantasm. His deck contains 2 arts cards, 1 quick card, and 2 buster cards. Our standard 2-1-2 deck. His Noble Phantasm, Wu Er Da, no second strike, is a single target arts Noble Phantasm. It hits 1 time and deals damage to 1 enemy, as expected. It has a 100% chance to instant kill them, and before applying any damage, reduces the enemy's defense for 3 turns by 20 to 40% based on your overcharge. This eventually will become strengthened, and will look like this, where it will be a 150% chance to instant kill, and have a general damage increase from, let's just compare MP1 to MP1, 900% to 1200%. This is a very simple MP. It's pretty nice that the defense applies before the damage for a nice extra damage boost. However, it has its problems. First off, instant kill, worthless. Absolutely worthless. Every single skill or NP that has instant kill on it, except for maybe like 3 in the entire game, absolutely worthless. Because instant kills don't really affect anything other than bronze rarity opponents, which you can probably take care of easily enough. Anything you want to instant kill, basically not going to hit. The other main issue is that his MP is one hit. Just one, which means even in the future land of JP where Castoria exists to help loop your arts servants, in a world with break bars, looping your MPs is really strong, and Old Man Lee can't loop without good follow-up. He needs good arts card follow-ups after that MP. So, really, this has a lot of issues on its own. Next up, we've got his passives. His passives are very strong, very simple. Veteran, A+, increases own arts performance by 8%, and critical star generation by 8%. This is a pretty good passive. Overall, this is pretty much what you want to see in a passive. It boosts his main card stat, along with critical star generation, which is okay. He can't make too much use of that, but overall fine. Too bad he only has a single passive, nothing else to help give him a little bit here and there, but it's a solid passive. Moving on to his skills. First off, we have Chinese martial arts, or Baji Quan. This is a pretty simple skill. It lets him ignore invincibility for 1 turn and increases his critical damage between 50 and 100%. A fine skill, but a single turn buff. Only a single turn buff, and the real problem with single turn buffs is that they don't think about lowering the cooldown for these single turn skills, so it's on a 5-turn cooldown. There are other servants in the game that will get these effects, but for 3 turns, and still have a 5-turn cooldown, which means overall this skill is quite weak because of the comparisons you can make to other servants. The uptime of it is awful. Moving on, we've got skill number 2, Sphere Boundary, Zenith. This gives him evasion for 1 turn, increases his critical star absorption for 1 turn between 300 and 500%, and gains critical stars between 5 to 15 based on level. Again, this is a decent skill, but once more, it has a terrible uptime. The star absorption, at the very least, should last multiple turns. You would think it would. After all, there are servants that have star absorption of up to 3,000% for 3 turns, and yet this one, 500% and only for 1 turn. The evasion's nice, the critical stars are nice, and it's a good 1-turn skill overall, but it's still a 1-turn skill. As I said before, 1-turn skills feel lackluster. Finally, his 3rd skill, Intersection of Yin-Yang. This increases attack for 1 turn between 20 to 30%, further increases attack for 3 turns between 10 and 20%, and gives him debuff immunity for 1 turn. Finally! The Lord has blessed us with a 3-turn buff! For the initial turn that this is active, it's very strong. A 50% overall attack buff is really good. 20% for the next 2 turns to complete the 3-turn buff is a decent charisma buff. So that's fairly solid, not bad. This is a 6-turn cooldown, which is a little bit longer for a skill that has this sort of effectiveness than what you'd want. But overall, this is pretty good. This is about what you want for... If you're going to design a single turn focused servant like this, having a skill like this really helps them out because it gives them 2 follow-up turns that are much stronger than all those other turns that are going to happen when he has no cooldowns. No skills to use. With these skills, you can see how Lu Shuwen is built. It's built around buff, gain stars with that critical damage, big attack up, and then massive burst explosive turn. But then the follow-up is 2 turns of having a okay charisma buff, and then another 2 to 3 turns of nothing. Maybe if they lowered the skill cooldowns to something reasonable, then 1-turn servants like this would be fine. But they haven't done that. They have the same cooldowns as servants that have 3-turn buffs for things like this, like the crit damage up, or the star absorption gain, or hell, even the 50% attack up. There are servants out there that have not quite that much, but close to it for 3 turns. It's honestly A problem that Delightworks themselves have with their implementation of this kind of servant and this style of servant, and they haven't figured out that, well, duh, of course that's not going to work when break bars exist. Maybe we should lower their cooldowns, or give them some extra utility for a couple turns, or something like that. But they haven't, and thus Old Man Lee kind of feels a bit weak. Servants in general like this feel a bit weak. But as always, you roll with your heart. If you see this old man and you're like, I gotta get that, I gotta get me some of that, he's cool, then obviously you're gonna wanna know what materials we need to level up these skills. I got bad news, everyone. Old Man Lee is pretty expensive, to be honest. For each skill, we are going to need 15 octuplet crystals, 44 bones, 59 stingers of certain death, and 24 ancient bells of tranquility. Which means to max all 3 of his skills, it'll take 45 of these octuplet crystals, 132 of these bones, 177 stingers, and 72 ancient bells. The bone and stinger costs are high on this man, extremely high. Even if you've been playing a while, it is easy to not have enough of these, especially with how incredibly common the bone requirement is on a lot of servants. And more ancient bell requirement, a relatively new material which has had quite a few new servants demanding it. If you've been rolling lately, there's a good chance that you're not going to have this material for yourself because of just how many servants have been needing it lately. It's easy to not have most of the materials this man needs for his skills. So I've been kind of disparaging Old Man Lee for a while, but how does he compare to his competition? Is he at least able to put up a good fight? As a single target 5-star assassin, his main competitions are Jack the Ripper, Mysterious Heroine X, King Hassan, and I will make special mention of a very soon to be released assassin, Kama, because she is coming out, well, like I said, very soon, about a month after Old Man Lee is released, maybe a month and a half. So Old Man Lee is, in my opinion, the bottom of the barrel here. He doesn't have the star production of a servant like Jack, or Kama, or MHX, because he only has a single quick card. He doesn't have the tankiness and strong cards of King Hassan. He doesn't have the specializations of MHX or Kama and their ability to absolutely annihilate certain archetypes of servant. Or hell, even of Jack with her bonus damage against females. And most importantly, he doesn't do challenge fights as well as any of them due to having just 1 strong turn and 4 weak turns to follow up. I cannot stress enough how much lower his damage will be than the others without multiple turns of buffs. And as for Kama, the reason I mention her is because about a month and a half after Old Man Lee is out, she comes out. And Kama is hands down the strongest single target assassin in the game. And for anyone that cares even a tiny bit about gameplay, I want you to know that if you want to roll for Old Man Lee, you are getting the worst pick and giving up a possibility of the best pick by spending your quartz now. Just to give you that heads up. Now, if you have rolled for Li Shuwen, what skills to prioritize? I would suggest your 3rd skill to get leveled up first. It is the only skill with multiple turns of buffs. It scales quite well for itself, so it is nice to get those levels on top of it, get the lower cooldown and everything like that. Next, I would go for his 2nd skill because it gives him a very good star generation and absorption for a turn to facilitate the strength of his 1st skill, which is the last one to level because his 1st skill is a good scaling crit damage buff, but it is enabled by the 2nd skill more than anything, and the 1st skill I think takes much higher priority. Honestly, all 3 of his skills do scale quite well, so if you want to build him up, I would suggest eventually maxing all 3 of them at some point in time. This is a servant that really works with higher level skills and will be much, much more effective the higher level his skills are, especially lowering that cooldown to try and get them up again in those challenge fights. As for craft essences, simply put, Li Shuwen is an arts-based servant with specialty in a powerful single turn. Therefore, I think the honest best way to help him out is increase his major MP strength so he doesn't need his buffs quite as much to be able to break a bar, and they can be saved for the follow-up turns instead of the initial turn to break that first bar. That's why, in my opinion, the most helpful CEs for hard fights and whatnot are the Black Grail, which gives you a 60 or 80% increased MP damage at the cost of 500 health per turn, and the best event CE that you can equip is Royal Icing, which gives a 15% arch performance up and a 25% increased damage buff. I think these are the best choices because you want to be able to save his own self buffs for turns other than the turn that you want to spend your NP on. You want to be able to NP to break a bar and then have a follow-up turn either on the much higher health break bar that will come after the initial one, spent either doing another MP or perhaps with big card follow-up into guaranteed crits. And these CEs help that out a whole lot. Now, let's talk about what servants to group Li Shuwen with. This is pretty simple. Waver, as always, is a very good servant to bring with his 50% MP charged, his attack up, defense up, and crit damage up. It's really hard to ignore him, as always. Tamamo no Mai is our premier arts servant, as he is an arts-based servant. He wants to take her. Tamamo brings her 50% arts up, her healing, her MP charge, her heals with her MP damage up, but most important, more than likely for Old Man Lee, is, of course, the fact that whenever Tamamo uses her MP, it lowers the cooldowns on all skills for the servants on field, and that helps a lot for this guy. His skills are quite good overall. They're pretty darn strong, so having them up as often as possible is really helpful, and Tamamo being able to lower that cooldown helps out a ton. And of course, can't talk about any arts servant without mentioning the future. In a year and a half from this video's publishing date, Castor Artoria will come out and grace our presence, and she will be the best art support servant in the game. Hell, probably the best support in general. Once she is out, she's incredibly good. Astoundingly good. I'm not sure if she's better than Tamamo for Old Man Lee, because like I mentioned, Lee's skills are good overall, and having them up as often as possible might just beat out the amount of strength that Castor Artoria can give you. So Tamamo's probably the premier servant to bring with this guy for those fights. So a quick too long didn't watch here right at the end. Li Shuwen is honestly not a good role. He's outshined by all of his competition. Break bars basically ruin him. His strongest point is good NP gain in a more arts-focused deck to help him loop, but is greatly weakened by the lack of multiple turn buffs to help the looping deal the damage it needs to. He's great for one turn and then spend 4 turns feeling lacking. I've harped on it long enough in this video. One-turn servants don't work. It's just how Fake Go is designed, and break bars ruin them. If instead of break bars, an enemy had a single big health bar of 10,000 like raid fights, then he'd be fantastic, but that's not the world we live in, unfortunately. And so, did I say 10,000? I meant like 10 million. Oh yeah, 10,000. He'll finally beat that out. And so to make this Too Long Didn't Watch even longer, if you do need a reason to help you decide you want to roll for him, I can come up with a good one, and that is very simple. He's a cool old badass. If you like cool old man archetypes, then Old Man Lee is, of course, one of the best choices in the entirety of Fake Go. So if you've enjoyed this video, check out my Twitch channel, follow me, all that. Thank you for watching, everyone, and I will see you next time. Good luck on your rolls.